All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Margot Conahan, ACRL's Manager of Professional Development. Thanks for joining us today. This is the second of our 3 webcasts that we're offering this week, covering topics related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Here at ACRL, we're really committed to supporting our members, staff, all the librarians and library workers during these uncertain times. We know this is a time of heightened responsibility and limited resources, and your well-being is important to us. We're all just taking it one day at a time. And honestly, if my dogs start barking, I apologize. As Lois mentioned, today's session is being recorded. We will email out the link after the webcast. As she said, it is taking longer for recordings to be processed at this time, surely due to increased demand. So it might take a day or two, but we will email it out once it's available, and we will also post it on the website. Today's webcast is Pandemic Pedagogy, Resources for Library Instruction at a Distance. I'd like to thank our presenter, Jenn Kelley, for being with us today. Jenn is a professor and reference librarian at the College of DuPage in Glen Ellyn, Illinois, where she chairs the library's Information Literacy Instruction Committee. Outside of the library, Jenn is faculty chair of professional development for the college, an ACRL immersion program facilitator, and teaches instructional strategies and techniques for information professionals at the Syracuse University iSchool. Jenn, thanks so much for being here today, and feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you, Margot, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you everybody who's attending right now, and thank you to the barking dogs and everybody who's accidentally involved in this webinar too. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a survey, and I understand that there's like 450 of us here today, and I don't even know if Google Forms can handle that, but if you have a chance, you can go ahead and take a look at that survey. It is not at all a requirement, but just something to give me an idea of what we're doing, and I'll share the results on that in a moment. The URL for that is, I just added into the chat box. I'm going to keep half an eye on the chat box, but there's a lot and it's coming, kind of fast and furious. So I will have time at the end for questions, but if something comes up, maybe raise your hand, and Margot's going to help monitor chat because she is awesome, and we'll try and get everybody's questions and concerns addressed. Excellent. All right. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us today for a conversation where our goal will be to share some ideas about how to support student learning and remote teaching during the next few weeks while colleges and universities begin what my institution is calling alternative instructional operating procedures. Hi, Karen. Hi. Okay, sorry. I said I keep half an eye. That was like all my eyes. So let's see. Before we jump in, I'm going to switch over real quick to the poll, and we'll see what we've got coming in here. So let me just switch the share here. Bear with me, it is here. It might take a moment for it to show up on your screens. We have 238 responses. So first question was, what is your institution's current status with respect to remote instruction? It looks like the majority of everyone, announced that there's going to be remote instruction, but haven't started yet. Second only to already announced remote instruction and classes have started remotely. There's some other sort of additional responses like, I have no idea. We're on quarters. That's an important thing to remember. I know that a good number of people are on quarters and kind of in between things, which puts you in an interesting place. Some contingency planning possible. So that's where we're at there. What hats are you wearing? We're wearing a lot of hats, some administrators and faculty development, and I apologize for this kind of popping around and jumping as people respond. I wonder, let's see, I am going to, for a moment, I wonder if I can, yeah, I'm not gonna worry about it. Okay, I'll just try and muddle through. Mostly information literacy instruction and reference folks here, a few others as well. Institution types, lots of universities, and 213 anti-stress self-care strategies that you're liking right now. And these I will absolutely be sharing after this is all said and done, because this is a kind of an important part of the presentation here. So keep those flooding in, especially the self-care tips. Those are extremely useful these days. All right, so I'm going to switch back to my slide presentation. Give me just a moment to do that. Great. Here we go. So here's the plan for the next 50 minutes or so. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's been going on here at my institution, share a couple of my favorite tools and strategies, and then we'll open this up for some sharing, some crowdsourced Q&A, which I see is already happening, which is fabulous. Shelley, I just saw your suggestion for the accepting responses. A little too late, but thank you. There's that crowd sourcing right there. And as a bonus feature, we'll be collectively creating a best practices guide, which I think should be fun. All right, so here's a little bit about me. I'm a reference and instruction librarian at the College of DuPage. It's a large community college outside of Chicago. I'm at home in Chicago right now with my 2 dogs. One of them is currently asleep right here by me. Hopefully he will stay asleep. And my husband, who is on a webinar in the other room. Hopefully we have enough bandwidth to handle that. My remote work right now is split between librarianship and my role as chair of faculty professional development. Which is to say, like a lot of you, I'm keeping myself pretty busy. So in my role, primarily as faculty professional development coordinator or chair of faculty professional development, I've been working a lot with learning technologies at my institution and with a lot of my faculty and adjunct faculty and other colleagues thinking about remote teaching and strategies for that. And so I've been reading a lot, I've been posting a lot, I've been sharing a lot of what other people have to say. And so I'm kind of drawing from a lot of what I've seen and a lot of what I've been sharing and a lot of what people have been telling me. So let's get started. My first pedagogical recommendation is to be intentional. Being intentional covers a lot of ground here and includes a lot of the best practices you've likely seen shared around on Facebook and Twitter and blogs and listservs. Being intentional in your practice, whether it's designing learning opportunities, teaching, being available to students and instructors, or any of the 70 billion things you're doing, addresses some really significant issues like you don't have endless amounts of time and energy. The instructors you partner with are scrambling to get through the rest of the semester. And students have been displaced, are anxious, and probably pretty confused right now. So while no one is asking you to throw your information literacy instruction best practices out the window, I am asking you to pause, consider your instructional goals, and identify the most straightforward way to get to that goal with your instructional activities, whether those are tutorials or research guides, synchronous online sessions, whatever it is that you're doing. I don't know how many of you attended yesterday's ACRL webinar, IL instruction at a social distance, but in it, Melissa Wong began her session with 3 very important recommendations. Lots of confirmations there, yes. Her 3 recommendations were start where you are, keep it simple, and don't do more than you can do. And I'm going to very quickly just share the link to her resources that she made available. A moment, I can't type and talk at the same time. Hopefully that works. Excellent. And there is going to be a recording of that available too. But she did a really great job of making her PowerPoint presentation stand on its own. So you should be able to look through all the resources that she shares and get a really good sense of what she had to say without watching the webinar, but the webinar will also be available. This is, and someone's asking, it's Melissa Wong, and I just shared the bit.ly link to all of her resources, a whole folder full of stuff. So she had lots of great resources and tools, and I'm not going to get into as many of those, but I do want to give you an approach that will allow you to better heed her advice of keeping it simple, starting where you are, and don't do more than you can do. Let's see, here we go. Okay. So in an ideal situation, i.e. not a pandemic, I use this 5-question design framework to guide everything from course design to assignment design to one-shot lesson plans. What I like about it is that at the center is a reminder of what should be grounding me and shaping my choices. Looking at this through a pandemic pedagogy lens, if we can say that that's a thing now, I can insert a new guiding principle into that center space. So where it says instruction program, vision, mission, goals, instructor values, philosophy, and learning goals, I can put something in like perfect is the enemy of the good, or just get through this, or it's okay to just be okay. Whatever the new reality is for your instruction program or alternative institutional operating procedures, you can let that guide your decisions about designing information literacy instruction. And I would say with that new reality in mind, I would focus on just the first 3 questions, right? Not worry so much about the assessment and the criteria, but focus on the outcomes. What do we actually want the learner to be able to do? Very, very specifically. I mean, again, in that ideal situation, we would want the learner to, be fully information literate. But at this point, we're thinking we want the student to be able to complete this assignment. We want the student to be able to access the library resources. We want the student to do very, very, very specific things. And thinking, what do they need to know in order to do this? The very basic steps, not the entire world of everything, but again. And then finally, the pedagogy. So how are you going to deliver that? And some of that is going to come down to, what the instructor is providing, what opportunities the instructor is providing, what opportunities you have for sharing learning materials, whether it's, again, doing something synchronous, creating a web resource, a LibGuide. Maybe it's just, a virtual handout. Those 3 things I think will help you be intentional in sharing all that information, in creating instruction that doesn't overwhelm you or anybody else. Any questions about this slide? Which link was it? I think it was the Melissa Wong. Let me copy that. Oops. Oh, someone else got it. Excellent. There it is. Fabulous. Okay. All right. So next up, we have being flexible. College of DuPage is a large community college, and one of the things we're learning about our students right now is that we don't know enough about them. We have, for example, no idea how many of them have computers at home, how many of them have internet access at home, how many of them who rely on access and accommodations will be able to receive the same level of assistance at a distance. Similarly, we have over 1,000 adjunct faculty members, many of whom also rely on face-to-face services and resources. I hope you're all in better situations and that your institutions have these bases covered, but you might want to go into the next couple of weeks assuming that your intended audiences do not have consistent access to computers and/or internet. You might also want to assume that students may not be dedicating as much time to their classwork as they did when face-to-face classes were in session. Many of our students are using this time to pick up additional shifts at work. Others will have to take care of children or other family members, healthy or sick. Also taking care of themselves and prioritizing themselves right now over other things. So keeping these factors in mind, as you design information literacy instruction will save you the frustration of creating time-consuming masterworks that don't get used, right? So thinking about some of the barriers that might keep users from accessing your instruction, again, in whatever modality you share it. Thinking about barriers that might prevent users from interacting with that instruction, and thinking about how, why, when users will want to apply your instruction. So if you're doing synchronous instruction, they might not be applying it then and there. Folks might be accessing resources late at night or early in the morning. Let's see, I have someone asking for the previous diagram. I will make these available afterwards and I can share them if that is okay. Hopefully that'll be okay. We'll keep going forward for the time being. Thanks. Okay, so here's a framework for thinking about being flexible. Universal design for learning. I think it answer the questions from that previous slide. I'm getting a notice that my internet connection is unstable. I apologize. As I said, universal design, I think, can help us answer those questions from the previous slide. UDL is a framework, if you're not familiar with it, for designing learning environments that are accessible and effective for all learners. To do UDL justice, we would need completely separate webinar. For information, I can recommend that you visit cast.org, that's CAST.org. And if somebody could copy that and repaste it as needed, because I think it'll disappear in that chat box pretty quickly as comments come in. That's a good question. Pamela Beagle's mentioning, maybe not click through and look at it right now, but save that for later. Good point. And thank you, Kristen, for upposting that. And then those UDL guidelines, cast.org as well. Thanks. So in a nutshell, Universal Design for Learning asks that we provide multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression when we design learning. What would this look like for information literacy instruction? Well, you're creating a short video tutorial on using an electronic resource. In order to reach more learners, you might consider adding closed captioning, a Word document transcript, and a quick step-by-step explanation of the same process on your research guide. Not only does this approach provide additional access to learners with sensory disabilities and learning disabilities who may be using screen readers or other tools, you're also accommodating students who may not have a video, or who are using a phone, or who are having connection issues like I am, who have multiple people trying to attend webinars from the same home. But with this accommodation, with these different levels of engagement, that user can more easily read something like the step-by-step guide online, even if they can't access the video, right? Contrast and colors and LibGuides, these are all excellent suggestions. Do not highlight text. Screen readers can't read it, absolutely. Melissa Wong had some really good tips as well in terms of accessibility, and I'm going to share some accessibility tools with you in a moment as well. But there are some fabulous good practices that we should be keeping in mind and making our resources, whatever they are, as accessible as possible. And these are the practices that we can just roll into our post-pandemic lives and just use to be inclusive instructors, right? Any questions about universal design for learning before we move on? A great request for an ACRL webinar about building accessible content and accessible pedagogy. All right. Moving on. So one silver lining that colleagues and I have identified during this process is that we're very clearly identifying plenty of opportunities for improvement. This, of course, is a positive way of saying, well, there's a lot of things that aren't going 100% well right now. One of my greatest hopes, both as a librarian who really is looking forward to revitalizing our library's mission and vision, and as a faculty developer without an actual faculty development program, is that my institution can take some time after this crisis is over and critically examine our position. For me, this will likely take a couple of forms. First, I'm a huge fan of the SOAR analysis. If you're unfamiliar, this is an alternative to the SWOT analysis that you might be familiar with from the business world. But instead of looking through a deficit lens at weaknesses and threats, you consider instead strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. So those are those 4 questions that are shared up there. So considering instead of, what are our weaknesses, it's what are our opportunities, turning those weaknesses into opportunities for growth, and thinking aspirationally about who we want to be and what we want things to look like going forward. And what I like about the SOAR analysis, apart from it just being positive and aspirational, is that it's a really flexible tool just at home in a large institutional context as it is in your personal reflection journal. So for these questions, just change the we to I, and you can consider your own plan for professional development and instructional growth. And I will have a SOAR analysis template that I'm sharing at the end too. For those of you who like templates, I'm a big template fan, a huge template fan. This is a sketch of a critical incident reflection framework, variations of which I've used at different junctures in my career. What it does is it encourages you to do 3 things. Reflect on action, so a past experience, something that has happened. Reflect in action as an incident happens. And finally, reflect for action. So considering actions you may wish to take in the future. If you're at all familiar with the Gibbs reflective cycle, this is sort of a trimmer version of that 5-step approach. So thinking about, something that happened, what happened, when, where, who, all those, journal questions, the so what about it, what were you feeling during, after, before, what went well, what didn't go well, and then the now what, the planning for the future. What will you do differently? What will you do the same? What tools or skills do you need to either keep on keeping on or change things up? I generally use a framework like this when I'm trying something new, like teaching from home for an entire month or facilitating an ACR webinar. It's important though to remember that that the critical incident here doesn't have to be something that's gone wrong. It could be something that has gone really, really well too. In that case, the framework can help you clearly identify what it is that went well and make sure that you can reproduce it or do it even better, and also help you share that as a best practice with people. And I see some people sharing some other excellent reflective tools. Something that also really flexible that I use is sort of a 1, 2, 3 tool that I did when I first started doing library instruction, where after every single session that I did, I identified something that went well, something that probably 2 things that I could have done better, or actually I think it's 3 things that I did really well, which was sometimes very hard. Sometimes those 3 things are like, nobody cried, nothing got broken. 2 things that you would want to change, and then 1 thing that really just like stood out, that sort of critical incident. And it could be good, it could be bad. Exactly, I like that sandwich, something good, something to improve, and something that worked. Absolutely. Or plus delta, and again, thinking of it not in terms of like what went bad or what was awful, but thinking about what could be changed, what could be improved, right? Comments or questions on the critical incident reflection framework? I have to say that what's interesting is that a lot of the incident reflection stuff comes from healthcare. And so the examples that I share in my references both come from the world of healthcare. And I think historically that critical incident does tend to be a bad thing. something that has gone wrong, but again, it doesn't have to be. All right, moving along. Final recommendation. One consistent piece of advice I've seen from educators is be kind, practice empathy, practice radical kindness. Initially, I think the intent seemed to be cut your students some slack, for crying out loud, or be nice to your learning technologies people because you're the 70th person they just explained the LMS to today. But as we get deeper into this situation, it's really become a plea to take care of each other. Today, a colleague who's here today, hi Kristen, who's supposed to stay hidden, shared an infographic from the Depression Project outlining the many ways that the pandemic is triggering mental health issues. So that's something to be thinking about as well. This image itself is a photo of a shop sign taken by my cousin who lives in Toulouse, courage and affection for all. How we demonstrate this, kindness and empathy, courage and affection, will vary a lot. Yes, be kind to your students and your colleagues, but don't forget to be kind to yourself. Cut yourself some slack. Give yourself permission to not be perfect. Or as another colleague of mine said, put the me in mediocre. I would highly recommend that we all take advantage of some or all of the self-care tips we shared at the beginning of the hour. And so speaking of sharing, I will start that sharing process. I've left a lot of time for this part of it, and it might be a little challenging with all of us here, but I have a plan. So let's do two things. First, if you have additional self-care recommendations or favorite teaching tools or some great reading recommendations, I'm going to give you this link, clickable in the box. It is bit.ly/pandemic pedagogy, all one word. And you can use this to get sharing. This is basically a collaborative guide to pandemic pedagogy and information literacy instruction. I have popped some things in there already. In a moment, I will maybe share my screen that, or maybe not, depending on how that goes. But all of this, my internet connection is unstable again, apologies. All of my materials for this, so the slides, my transcript, some other resources are already included, along with some links to some of the things I talked about, like .org. What else? Some information about reflective, critical reflection, that's in there as well as some ideas that I've gathered from my colleagues at the College of DuPage in terms of tools you can use for collaboration, tools you can use for tools you can use for checking the accessibility of your resources. And I know that all of you just watching the comments go by, all of those, you all have great suggestions too. And I think together we can build this really dynamic tool. Let's see, repeat the 3-2-1 assessment I use in my instruction. Absolutely. It is kind of what you want it to be. The way I used it was like I had a notebook, and literally as soon as everybody left the classroom, I would open up my notebook, write down the name of the class, when it was, who the instructor was, what I was teaching, and identify 3 things that went well, 2 things that I could improve on, and sort of 1 critical incident, like 1 sort of big takeaway or surprise or just something significant from that. Excellent. You're welcome. Other questions? I can't imagine that I have all the answers, so I encourage people to chime in with their answers as well. Yeah, Erin, I think some of these are tools that you can use for anything. I mean, these are all just, sort of frameworks that I use generally that seem to apply well to our current situation. Please share everything with everybody, absolutely. Invite your colleagues to contribute to the guide, share the slides. Good place to go for information literacy resources for students. Good question. The library. I'm sure some people will share some things as well. Let's see, what ways, sorry, I'll come back to you on that, Kristen. I don't know where to find you. What ways do I envision collaborating with teaching faculty to set up curriculum assignments? That's a really good question. I would love to know what other people are doing. But I think for me, and actually this is something I was going to include in the presentation, but didn't. What I did early on-ish was I sent a survey to my faculty that I'm liaison for. And really simple Google survey like I used with you all. And it asked maybe 3 questions. One was, how comfortable do you feel that your students will be able to succeed in your learning outcomes for the rest of the semester using library resources at a distance? 100% of them said that they were very comfortable with their students being able to get along with just online resources. I had a couple other pretty basic questions, but then I had a comment field, and that's where I got some really valuable feedback from my faculty. Asking about, how do my students get library cards? How do my students use this one database? Is there a tutorial for it? So I think making that sort of open form where your faculty can give you some feedback or give you some ideas or share some of their concerns or questions is a really good way. Just sending out like, hey, are you doing okay? Yes or no? And then give them a place to raise some questions. And I see a lot of people who are using Teams, who are using, share the survey. Absolutely. Let me make a note of that. Share my liaison survey. I will add that to the collaborative document. Lots of people using Teams, which is great. And communication is just so key. I mean, one of the other things I can say is that having all of your key information on one place, whether, if you're using LibGuides, maybe update your profile so that you have information that like points people like, here's the library's, single source guide for information about what's going on right now. I don't know if faculty are getting to a point where they have email overload, but that might be something to avoid, lots and lots of emails. Yeah, I know. If they're anything like us, then they are a little overwhelmed with emails coming from a bunch of different people. Fun Stuff LibGuide is such a great idea. That's a really great idea. Yeah, worrying about the students. I think with the students, it's hard. It's really hard. Yesterday, our library we had virtual chat, and it was super, super busy most of the morning through the early afternoon. It's slowing down a little bit, but yeah, relying on online resources. Yeah, there's a question there about being disoriented about shifting from reference books to online reference resources. So if people have go-to sources that they like, maybe that's something we can share in the guide as well. And I hope people will feel comfortable adding new categories and new things to share in there. Seeing lots and lots of good suggestions. Any questions from just go? I know that this wasn't a full hour. Yeah, I'm seeing a ton of great stuff. Yeah, if whoever has the fun stuff LibGuide, if you could post a link, that would be great. I'd also love to see that. Lots of people learning how to use Zoom for the first time. Absolutely. And I got to say, oh, I got like almost 100 people in this guide. That's great, but also a little overwhelming too. Just to reiterate, I mean, if you're not comfortable using Zoom as a platform, don't use Zoom as a platform. If there's something else that you like better and you can use that, go for it. I would love to encourage and empower everyone to be really straightforward with the faculty that you're working with who may be more or less comfortable using different technologies. So if you have someone who's been teaching online for 20 years and is totally down with it, and you are not, be upfront about that. Maybe suggest an alternative, like you'll voice record something and send them the file, or send them some PowerPoints with all the notes. Because I'm hoping that just as we're being kind and empathetic, that the teaching faculty are also there as well. So many good suggestions. The Google Doc is a little full right now. But bookmark that, come back to it. And I think some people had some questions. This is being recorded. The recording will be shared. At the beginning, Elois and Margot mentioned that the things are taking a little bit longer to upload to the website. But as I said, the Google Doc has my slides in it. And let me, yes, in the chat, thank you, Margot, the chat will get shared. So all of these awesome resources will get shared. I'm gonna go back to, let's see, my contact information, I guess. Let's see. Oh, I'm starting subtitles, that's weird. Don't know that, sorry about that. Subtitles aren't Let's go, here we go. Nope, that doesn't have my contact information on either. Let's go here. There we go. Feel free to email me. Also, if you are looking for somebody to practice Zoom on and you don't have anyone, so for example, if you're a solo librarian, or no one has access, I'm down with that. I can help you make an appointment with me. Just send me an email and say, hey, do you have time? The link to the Google Doc. Yes, okay, yeah. Let me get back to that. Back to the, there you go. Thank you all. Great to have so many people here. Keep talking if you like. Take off and play with some things if you want to do that. I'm sharing the link so you can click it again. Just got lost in all the thanks and byes. Thank you all. Yes, be safe. Be safe. Thank you all. Oh, Kristen, I just saw that you said something and it disappeared, that you have your drawing from immersion on your wall still, which is awesome. Karen. Yep, Pedal Tavern drawing on the wall from immersion. That's fabulous. Yeah, and I'll be hanging out here for a little bit if anyone has questions for me. If I'm sharing links with attendees. I don't have access to the attendees list, but I think that Margot will be sending something.
Yes, we'll send out, when we send out the recording, we'll include links to the chat. We'll also include the link to the collaborative doc. So we'll make sure all of that gets shared with everyone.
Great, thank you, Margot.
And I also saw a question about confirmation of attendance. If anyone needs some sort of certificate, I'm going to put my email in the chat. You can just email me and I can send one to you. And thank you, Jen, for your time today, for sharing all these resources, for being with us. I saw someone comment on your calm, soothing voice, and I agree.
Thank you. This was fun. Oh, good question from Chris about Blackboard Collaborate. I've found that Zoom causes me fewer problems than Collaborate Ultra. And I don't know why, but I've never had connectivity issues using Zoom. But lots of times when I use Ultra, I do. And I don't know if it's, I don't know what causes that. Yeah. You haven't heard anyone sound like a gerbil on Zoom yet, right? What is it about Collaborate? Ugh, I know. If it's the tool that you have that's available that you're being asked to use by your institution, I think there's some ways that you can kind of mitigate its awfulness by, encouraging people not to use their video, et cetera, like that. But it should be able to handle it. It's a little frustrating. I do prefer Zoom, which is too bad because my institution is a collaborator institution. Yeah, Zoom is going to be just like a household name by the end of this month, right? They've been great. Yeah, it's not just you. I've heard that for institutions that have a college account with Zoom, this is my institution because I use it for interviews or interviews, that Zoom has suspended the 40-minute time limit. I think that requires you creating an account with your institution, and it might be something you want to check with your IT, but I know for us, up until a week ago, if we had more than, was it 3 people in a Zoom room, then it would time out after 40 minutes, but they have suspended that for the time being. Something to look into. I've used Microsoft Teams a few times, and again, my school isn't there yet, which is frustrating, even though we have it, but that's also a really good tool for communicating. Waiting 8 hours for the Zoom videos to load to the cloud. I have noticed that too, that it does take quite a while for those videos to render. And I don't know if it's any quicker with Collaborate. It's been a while since I've used that feature. Thank you all so much for your comments and for hanging out and sharing. I hope everyone's doing okay. It's raining here in Chicago, which is a bit of a bummer. Oh, the slide, yes. Sorry, the 5-question backward design slide again. Let me do that for you. I keep hitting the wrong button. Here we go. Someone mentioned Google Slides having closed captioning. Yes, if you use it live, there's a way that you can make that happen. I don't know if it records. Wrong one. Let's go back. There we go. Snow in New Hampshire. And my folks are in Massachusetts and they've had a very, very mild winter. I don't know if you have too, Karen. Sunny, quiet day in the mountains sounds nice. Yes, the slides will be available. The slides are available on the collaborative site. And let me see, did I copy that? Here we go. There's the URL. Oh, and Carol for sharing the how to record a slideshow with narration and slide timings. Oh, I'd take 63 and cloudy. That sounds nice. Sunny and 75. Unfair. iMovie still works. iMovie does work. Yeah, that's a good workaround. There are so many options. It's really, it's kind of nice to be able to have so many things to choose from and play around and experiment and have, I think some of us have that luxury of feeling like you can play around and experiment now. I'm going to mute my mic, and if you have any questions, I will answer them in the chat. Thank you.